So, hello everybody. Is everybody having a great time at Emberfest? Yes, that's what I like to hear. We have a lot to get through, so we're going to jump straight into it. My name is Chris.
And my name is Marine. I'm pretty sure I'm a bit younger, but somehow I'm the one with a backup chair. So Chris and myself are senior software engineers at Main Matter, and we work full-time on making Ember better for everyone. These talks explain what it means, how we can dedicate so much time to Ember, and what it implies for the framework's future. And also, we all know how enthusiastic Chris can be about Ember, so I'll let him add a little bit to the story.
Thanks, Marine. I wanted to make sure that everybody here knows how amazing Ember is today. It's quite easy in a conference talk to think about what's coming, but I just want to slow down for a little minute and make sure that everybody thinks about Ember now. And that, if it's so great, that's a lot to cram into a 30-minute talk. So how should we actually do this?
So we'll start with what might be Chris' favorite part. Ember is modern now. You've probably heard about Vite and JGS already. You will hear more. Then Ember is modern. Okay, what does that mean for you as a developer working every day on your Ember app? We present you the tools we have implemented for you to adopt modern Ember as easily as possible. And since implementing these tools required a lot of time, how were we able to do this as part of our daily job? You might guess the answer to this question is the Ember Initiative, and you'll know everything about it by the end of the talk. So let's not wait any longer. Chris, please tell us why Ember is modern and awesome.
Okay, sure. So, first of all, I want to quickly define my vision of what a modern framework actually is. So, a modern framework is one that uses modern build tools. And it provides an enjoyable developer experience, short build times, good performance, etc. A modern framework is one that feels more like JavaScript and less magical or automatic. And it aligns well with JavaScript standards and is much more newcomer friendly. A modern framework is one that integrates well with the modern way to write JavaScript, which, let's face it, is just TypeScript. But these are, you could think of them as pillars of a modern framework. And thankfully, if you look at these and compare them to the pillars of Polaris, we have a perfect match. Vite is our modern build tool. GJS gives us an Ember syntax that is much more like native JavaScript. And now we have a native TypeScript integration. So let's take a few minutes and dive into these three pillars. And by the way, every single one of you should be adopting all of these right now.
So Vite is a very special pillar of Polaris for us. We worked on getting it ready 2 years ago as part of the Ember Initiative. And more recently, we worked on finalizing it for everyone to be able to use it. And this hard work is about to pay off because in Ember 6.8, when you will generate a new Ember app with Ember New, you will get a Vite experience by default. This is a big deal, but it's important to understand why it's such a big deal. Vite improves the developer experience because it's faster to rebuild. One of the core architectural decisions that Vite made is that everything is an yes module when it's being used in the browser. So Vite can keep track of the whole module graph, and when you change something, it needs to change only one module and everything else is cached in the browser. But Vite isn't all about speed. There is another key aspect. Now we rely on Vite and Rollup to do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to our build system and dev server. It means the Ember community no longer needs to do this work. The Ember core team, all the contributors, everyone can focus on what makes Ember special instead of reinventing the wheel every time we add a new feature to Ember CLI. And also, instead of having Ember CLI add-ons that influence the build system, we can rely on Vite community plugins. This opens up a whole new world of possibilities, and it would be great to see a few Emberfest talks next year by people who integrated the strangest D plugins to their Ember apps.
Okay, so the next pillar of Polaris is GJS, or template tag, or content tag, or template imports, or single file components. Yes, there's a lot of names for this one feature. Whatever you know this feature as, I tend to just call it GJS, but if you think of them as single file components, that tells you most of what you need to know about this feature. The old way of writing components is that you would write a HBS file and then optionally have a JavaScript file beside it on disk. And then somehow some magical Ember fairy would perform their magic and tie those two files together and spit out a single component. I've been an Ember developer for a very long time now, and I actually liked the separate HBS and JavaScript files, but we needed to change with the times here, and we needed to adapt to some of the trends in the wider ecosystem. When we were talking about the pillars of Polaris, I mentioned that we expect things to be less magical. And you can see this magic causing problems when training new Ember developers, somebody who has never seen Ember before. There's a lot of hand-waving that's needed to explain something connects these two files together without any imports. And something else is magically discovering where some fancy lib double colon fancy component is like what it refers to and where it's pulling it in. Anything that needs to be explained with such hand-waving is a liability for teams as they grow and have to onboard new developers. So what's the alternative? Let's go through a quick example. People who have already gone through this process, this is probably telling you stuff that you already know, but we'll go through it anyway in case you don't know. The first things that change is that these two files, they combine into one single GJS file. Now you can see that in here, in our template, we say this.sayHello. And it's less magical because it's inside a class, and we know what that function is referring to. The next thing that you do is that you define where the invocables come from. So invocables are just helpers, components. And we do that using standard JavaScript syntax of imports. Nothing strange, nothing magic, just an import. This gives us a lot of benefits. We're no longer guessing where that component is actually coming from. You can just see the path. And this is much easier for juniors or people who are new to Ember to follow the breadcrumbs and actually know where all the code actually lives. And the third thing is that this is much easier for the tooling to understand. Before GJS, we had to do specific work in every single possible developer tool just to know how it magically discovered references to things that were in people's templates. This is way too high of a burden to put on a relatively small Ember core team and the community maintainers, and relying much closer to standards will, again, open up a world of possibility for us.
Okay, so building on the question of a better developer tooling, the third pillar of Polaris is native TypeScript support in Ember. So before Ember 6, any Ember developer using TypeScript would have to rely on the definitely type package for Ember. It worked reasonably well, the TypeScript team did an amazing job. However, it would be much more efficient to generate real types as part of the build system when shipping Ember source. Shipping types was not an easy task. The Ember core team had to come up with brand new Ember considerations because TypeScript didn't really care about breaking types between minor versions. You can see the specifications they came up with at semberts.org if you're interested. And now it's done. You have native TypeScript support out of the box when you generate an Ember app with a TypeScript flag.
So we've spent a lot of time on this topic, but it is something that is really important to spend time on because in some cases, the message is not getting out. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. There are some decision makers who think Ember is old and clunky, so they're currently plotting to move existing apps to other frameworks. There are some companies who are building new apps and are choosing to use a different framework because their existing Ember app is stuck on 3.x and they don't know how awesome Ember is these days. And there are some developers out there that are starting brand new projects like that would be perfect to use Ember for, but they don't even think to reach for Ember because they had a bad impression like 8 years ago, or worse yet, they've never even heard of Ember. We need to stand up and tell all of these groups of people that Ember is modern now, Ember is awesome, and Ember is viable for new projects and businesses. So that's it. Ember is awesome now. What does that actually mean for developers working every day on their projects?
So what it means for you is you should make your Ember app modern now. We worked hard to make this as easy as possible with a few limitations. So first, if you're on a very, very, very old version of Ember, upgrade to a regular old version 3.28. 3.28 is special because all the tooling for Vite and GJS has been backported to work with it. So once you're on 3.28, the next thing we recommend you do is to update all your components and run the test to use GJS. And now we have people in the room panicking because they know they have 3,000 files falling into this category. Fear no more, we have a code mode. Its name is template tag code mode. Chris and Ed rolled the dice and picked a name among all the options we have for GJS. It's located in the Embroider build Embroider mono repo, and it has its own detailed README with all the options, all the prerequisites, everything you need to know to use it. So let's do just a quick overview. The code mode aims at being progressive, which means you don't have to change all your 3,000 files in one giant PR. You can provide the code mode with a glob pattern to define which components to convert. Also, you can see this as a way to ease your migration to Vite, because when using the code mode, when you encounter a build error, the file will be skipped and the code mode will keep going. The same build error would have blocked your migration to Vite. So by using template tag first with a file by file approach, it can be a strategy to progressively spot and fix the error and have your way to Vite. And one extra benefit is your build will be faster because Embroider will have far less work to do to find your invocables during the build. So you don't have to migrate to GJS to migrate to Vite. It's just a recommendation to make your life easier. And then you upgrade to Vite. And to do so, you can use Ember Vite code mode. It's a code mode we have implemented for you. And the idea is you run a command and your app built with Vite. in practice, there can be a few additional steps, especially if you use a lot of incompatible V1 add-ons, or if your Ember app does too many, let's say, artistic things. But the code mod experience is very guided, so give it a try. Also note that V1 add-ons are compatible with Vite most of the time, but Embroider does work under the hood to get them work, so V2 is more performant. And once you're on Vite, it will be way easier for you to follow the path to the Ember 6 series if you're not there yet. Also, so if you want to know more about how we build this kind of tools, popular add-ons, compatibility, migration paths, I wrote a series of blog posts on the Main Matter website, so you can check them out. Okay, so we have a code mode for JGS, we have a code mode for Vite, we don't have a code mode for TypeScript. The work would be mostly manual anyway, because you need to be mindful about the types you want to use in your application, and that's not something we will cover in 30 minutes.
So, this sounds like there's been a huge amount of work done on Ember in the last few years. Let's take a look at some of the contribution graphs together and see what that actually looks like. So this graph shows contributions to Embroider over the past year-ish. You can see that the number of commits really increase in about February until about April. This is the period that we released Embroider 4, and the Ember core tooling team made some significant improvements to the template tag code mod as well at this time. You can see that it kind of cuts off there at the end. And this is the time when myself and Marine worked on the Ember Vite code mod for a little while. And then after that, it cuts off again. And that's when we started working on fixing the Ember inspector to work with Vite. But this is interesting because, how can just two developers have such a marked and noticeable difference on contribution graphs like this?
So Ember is not supported by one giant company that allocates developer time to its own problems, which benefits the community by extension. Instead, Ember is supported by the community itself, so we need a collective strategy to make significant improvements over time. At this point, you might think we're asking for more contributions, but what we're showing here are not contributions across the whole Ember ecosystem. What we're showing here is contributions to a few complex projects that needed some direct focus. And by complex project, I mean a project one developer cannot easily contribute to without first building a solid knowledge of the context. When you ask open source developers to contribute to things, they don't often commit so much of the time to big and complex infrastructures projects the whole community relies on. So instead of asking for random drive-by contributions, we have a new model that allows us to work full-time on hard problems other people haven't been focusing on.
So this is where the idea of the Ember Initiative comes in. The actual idea of the Ember Initiative is very simple. We want to have a number of senior developers working full-time on Ember. These senior developers will be working on the most important features for the framework itself and the wider community. And as Marine just said, it just so happens that those most important features happen to be the hardest. A perfect way to understand the impact of the Ember Initiative is to look at where it came from. The Ember Initiative is a continuation of the Embroider Initiative, which was put in place to finally get Embroider over the line. and make it the default experience for everybody in Ember. That initiative was wildly successful, and it accelerated the completion of Embroider. And now we're trying to apply that same successful formula to the other hard problems in the Ember framework and the wider ecosystem in a way that can just keep going indefinitely. With people working full-time on Ember and the surrounding ecosystem, we can deliver the big projects faster and better. So, the Ember Initiative is amazing and wildly successful. So what? Like, I know I personally like that Ember is getting better, but we have to be realistic here. Ember isn't just about weekend warriors building funky apps in their spare time. Ember, there are literal billion-dollar companies that have decided to use Ember, and there are many people's livelihoods dependent on that technology stack. And although everyone in this room is getting a really healthy dose of like how amazing and modern Ember is now, this message is being lost before it gets back to the boardroom. These ideas are not factoring into technology decisions that are being made over the next 12 months. If you are actually one of these decision makers, by the way, come talk to me after this and we will like get you on the Ember Initiative. But for everybody else, we need you to bring this message back to your decision makers. And to do that, we came up with some nice, good corporate speak phrases that you can bring to your higher ups. And here's one with a lot of talking points in it.
Becoming a member of the Ember Initiative is a strategic investment in Ember and an investment in the health and longevity of your app. There is a direct return on investment since Main Matter will pair with members weekly to resolve issues or adopt new Ember features.
And that is you talking to your manager, by the way. So write this down. So that's the pitch. What makes this whole thing an even better deal is that it's actually kind of cheap. The Ember Initiative allows multiple companies to share the burden of funding full-time work in Ember. And it's much more sustainable than just like hiring a core team member. For the companies, it's more sustainable because you don't need to hire a dev and then manage their work. And you also have to only pay for a fraction of a senior developer salary. And myself and Marine are able to work directly on hard topics that don't get the kind of investments that they deserve. For example, one of our biggest successes early in the Ember Initiative was we helped Discourse, who are here, convert their entire code base to GJS in what felt like only a few weeks. And some of the things that we discovered during that process were fed back into the Embroider template tag code mod. So everybody benefited from that process. For Ember itself, it's much more sustainable because there's a healthy separation between the company and the framework. We have had a few cases in the past where companies hire a bunch of core team members and push things in a particular direction, only to eventually stop investing in Ember. And because we pair with the teams from each of the initiative members, we can see how upcoming work in Ember is going to affect those members' apps and their engineering teams. The Ember Initiative, especially being part of Main Matter, is best placed to ensure continued development in the framework without being swayed too much by specific needs or whims of a product company. So everything we presented in this talk so far, getting Ember ready for Vite, the Ember Vite code mod, working on the template tag code mod, it was all possible in a relatively short amount of time thanks to the Ember Initiative and the Embroider Initiative. The Ember Initiative is a way to invest in Ember with a guarantee that your investment is going to be used to solve some of the harder problems. So Now we understand how amazing the Ember Initiative is and how it's been successful in the past. What would that mean for us if we could keep this going on forever? What would the next set of awesome things that we would get be if everyone in this room backed the Ember Initiative today?
Let's give you an example of a hard problem that hasn't received the investment it deserves. Could you please raise your hand if you use the Ember Inspector? Okay, so as expected, a lot of people use it. It's a very popular browser extension that can be vital for development teams. Now, could you please raise your hand if you knew that from October 2024 to June 2025, the Inspector CI was broken on main?
Okay, a few.
Okay, so almost no one knows, and that's expected. I mean, it's a tool you use every day. It works. You expect it to work. Why would you go check its CI? Now, one last question. If you update your app to build with Vite, do you expect the inspector to work?
Yeah.
I installed the app successfully. It almost worked. I mean, the solution is here. The solution is here. It's almost a matter of release at this point. It will work with the compat feature that Embroider used to fill the gap between old world and Vite world. And it's not the perfect future-proof solution. It's a compat solution that we will use until future versions of Ember expose a better API to the inspector. You have no idea how much time this project needs. Or maybe you have if you read my blog post. But we've already invested months of work to unblock Vite support for the inspector, and it's almost there. But the inspector will need new investment to implement the new solution for the future.
So, the Ember Initiative is about this future, the future of Ember. Up until now, it's been a lot about Vite and making that work and making it be the default experience for everybody. And without the initiative, I suspect we might have still been waiting for that to become the default. The Ember Initiative isn't just about maintenance. It's yes, okay, we fixed the Ember Inspector and almost merged that PR, but maybe that work might have happened anyway. Maybe it would have taken another 6 or 12 months, but it happened much sooner because we had the time to dedicate to it. With that in mind, if I was to define the Ember Initiative in just one word, I would have to say that it means velocity. Without dedicated time to work on things like that are essentially the backbone of the Ember community, we don't have enough experience accumulating to get anything done at a reasonable speed. As I said before, Vite wouldn't have been the default yet if it wasn't for the Ember Initiative and the Embroider Initiative. If we had the Ember Initiative sooner, maybe the planned router improvements for Polaris wouldn't have been descoped. But now, because the Ember Initiative exists, we are already starting the work on those router improvements, and they will be available much sooner than they would have been otherwise.
Okay, so talking about the new version for the router, now is the perfect time to look at our roadmap. So of course you all know by now that the Ember Initiative is more than features on a roadmap. It's about keeping Ember modern and securing your investment in a framework you build your business on. But we still want to have a roadmap to give the community visibility on what we're doing. So Route Manager API. 3 years ago at Emberfest Paris, Ed Faulkner did a talk that explains what causes a pain you can encounter when dealing with nested routes, because route lifetimes are not the same as templates lifetimes. And Route Manager API is the first step to lay the groundwork to implement the new design for routing, which will be resources-based. Then we talked about Vite a lot, but there are still a few ongoing things that we need to finish off. Land Ember Engine support for Embrader Vite. Improve the build speed for massive Ember apps, so it's at least on par with what Ember Clay was before. And last tiny things to finally get Vite as a default experience. Also, I said before that we fixed the support for Ember Inspector as part of the Ember Initiative, but that's not the only thing that happened. We have an Ember Initiative member who had a list of existing feature requests for the inspector they wanted to see implemented. And since we're Ember Inspector experts now, we added them all to the list.
So this all works because of the members. None of this would have happened if it wasn't for them. So I would like to give a round of applause for all of these members that have backed the Ember Initiative. But now we have to give you the harsh truth. We need more members to keep this train running. The Ember Initiative is a very new concept, and we have been figuring it out a little bit, and we have been trying to make it work effectively long term. The solution that we've settled on is to simplify the pricing structure and to make it much clearer what you are actually getting for the money that you spend. If you become a member at either of these two tiers, you will get pairing time with the team, and you will have either 3 or 6 days per month that will be given to work on the Ember framework or particular topics that are important to you. And these are now monthly subscriptions because we want this to continue long term and provide a sustainable way for us to improve Ember at a pace that we are all happy with.
Okay, so now you all know what the Ember Initiative is, and you know why the Ember community needs it. So it's time to go and discuss this with your managers and decision makers. Ember is a community that achieved great things together over the last 13 years. And with enough members, the Ember Initiative can help us rise to the challenge of the next decade.
And if you want to chat to us about any of this stuff, come and talk to me in the hall. I want to talk about this all the time. Or if you're really keen, sit beside me at dinner tomorrow. Or, yeah, I'm happy to talk. And you can reach out to us on all of these socials.
Thank you.
Thank you so much also for all the work you have.